Welcome, everyone, to the Paranormal Pride. I'm your host, Denise Pridemore. I hope everybody's having a great October to start out with. Prayers for everybody in Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, and some of the in Virginia also got hit too with some of the hurricane. And sorry for anybody who lost everything or lost anyone that they loved. We had family that were all the way across the state, basically, from Clearwater to Flagler and Daytona that were hit. We had show host in South Carolina that got some of the storm as well. So, praying everybody gets everything back up soon. And, I've been seeing a lot of work orders come through for getting service back up down there for your telephones. So just be aware that they are working on it if you are a Lumen customer. I've seen that. So, but on a brighter note, we have a great guest tonight for Haunted Month. We've got Sam Baltrusis. I hope I said that right. I hope I didn't butcher that. And he's written a bunch of books. He's been on a bunch of TV shows, and I'm going to let him talk to you about that because I think you guys, he does a better job of it than I do. So I'm really excited to introduce to you guys Sam Baltrusis. Welcome, Sam, to the Paranormal Pride.
How are you?
I'm fine. So how did you get started in the paranormal?
So am I noticing feedback here? Is there something I can do to stop the feedback? It's weird. It was not giving feedback. Now it's fine. Okay. It seems to be working now.
So
okay. So how did I get started with the paranormal? So I basically for many years I was a journalist. I was a journalist for about 20 years. And I focused more on entertainment journalism. I worked for MTV, VH1, and then I started doing crime-related stories, and that was for about 5 years before I moved back to Boston in 2007. And so I started writing. I always would write paranormal-themed articles for the local newspaper, local magazine. And one article I wrote called "Haunted Hotspots of Boston," that really just like exploded, and it turned into my first book deal in 2011, and it was called "Ghosts of Boston." And that started my journey from writing about the paranormal to going to all the locations that I write about and experiencing things to the point where I'm actually, I immerse myself in the locations when I write about them. So I would say, like, when it comes to Salem or other haunted hotspots in New England, I have spent so much time there to communicate with the spirits and to really know their backstory.
I know that you guys have had, or that you live up near all the wonderful old haunted stuff. I'm from Baltimore, so I was born and raised in Baltimore, so I know about old. Just what's up there is even older than what's old in Baltimore. And let's see, weren't you born and raised in Florida?
Yeah, that's the weird thing. So I was originally from Pensacola, Florida, which actually is old too, believe it or not. A lot of people don't realize that Pensacola, Florida was one of the original settlements, and then it was a Spanish settlement, and then the Spanish moved over to St. Augustine. So St. Augustine gets to claim to fame as being the oldest city or settlement in Florida, but when it comes to Boston, Boston and Plymouth and all that dates back to 1620. So a lot of the buildings are old in New England, which allows for a lot of history books to be written and also history books with ghost stories.
Yeah. Well, my daughter lives in Pace.
Oh yeah.
So we were just in Pensacola.
Right down the street.
Okay, just down the street. And so needless to say, we drove all the way, we were just watching Ghost Hunters at the Pensacola Lighthouse. My husband's going, we drove right by that, going back and forth from Gulf Shores to Pace. So
there's a lot of untapped material, because actually I worked at a newspaper in Florida, because I went home for a couple years before I moved back to Boston in 2007, and I wrote about the paranormal in Pensacola, and I still, my goal is to focus on New England because that's sort of been my focus for so many years. But I want to go back home eventually and write a book on Pensacola because there's so many ghost stories and so many haunted historic locations that I want to really focus on, and also focus it on it with a different lens. I think a lot of the stuff that's been done on Pensacola is sort of untapped locations. So I would love to go back and revisit the locations that I knew very well as a kid.
Yeah, I know that when we've been, it's been all for, looking at houses or something along those lines. We haven't had the chance to really investigate any place down there, except for, hey, I like to live in this subdivision, or I like these houses. We have checked out Fort Morgan and Fort Gaines. We have seen them because we also stayed over on Dauphin Island, which is beautiful. I mean,
it is. That whole area is so beautiful.
It is, and it's weird. I mean, when you're driving through that part of Alabama over there, you just get a weird feeling about some of the older houses over there. But again, I don't know because I wasn't in those houses. So it's good to know that we're not wasting our time if we go on vacation to Pensacola to go ghost hunting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely there's a lot of haunted locations there. I think there's a lot of locations that haven't really been written about or talked about. But we all know about the Lighthouse in Pensacola, but there's like the Sanger Theater. There's pretty much all the houses downtown have a backstory to it that could be a haunting. And I'm clairvoyant, so I actually had an experience. I worked for a newspaper downtown of Pensacola. I saw what looked like a Confederate soldier walk by in the back room, and this is before I kind of accepted my abilities as a clairvoyant. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm seeing it was literally a soldier walking, and it walked through the walls. So I'm like, why would I? And it was a Union soldier. I'm like, why would there was a Confederate soldier and there was a Union soldier. Like, why would there be a Union soldier there as well? And it turns out that was where a fort was during the Civil War. So the part of downtown was on Palafox Street. Has a Civil War backstory that I didn't even know about.
Yeah. So when we were going from Pace to Gulf Shores, you have to go through downtown to get there because there's no good way to get from 90. Well, there's no good way to get to that road. I think it's 98. So I don't think there's any good way to get over there. So, you have to go through downtown and do all the winding stuff to get on that back road to get to all the bridges to get back there. So because it was the bar district is what it looked like to me. From the person just driving through town that's a visitor, it looked like there was just a lot of bars down there.
Well, yeah, that was
some weird houses.
Yeah, that was where my office was. So my office was in the bar district, but but it kind of looks like New Orleans. It sort of has like that Palafox Street has that New Orleans French Quarter vibe to it, and it's also really close to New Orleans too. Like growing up, I went to high school in Pensacola, and I would actually go to New Orleans a lot on the weekends. Like that was kind of where you go to party, and also Mobile too, which is close as well. And so I had a lot of experience with ghosts as a young adult without accepting that I was actually seeing ghosts. I was having experiences and I was really terrified and scared, but it was something that kept happening over and over and over again. And I wanted to, I don't know, I wanted them to go away. I really did because it was really terrifying. And then I moved back to Boston, and then I started writing the articles, and I said, you know what? I was a journalist for 20 years. Why don't I take that recorder and start interviewing the ghosts? And that changed everything for me. So instead of being afraid of the ghost, I'm like, you know what? I want to get to know you and know your story. And they started opening up and they started responding, and I started getting responses from the spirit realm.
That's a good way to go about it. Just interview them like you would anybody living. That way you don't treat them any different than you would a living person. I just know from my experiences, if we were coming into our clairvoyancy in the early 70s, we weren't allowed to express it.
No.
Because it was one of those things that was kept hidden. Our parents said, "Don't tell people."
And we had the Exorcist too, and so we had we had a lot of like scary movies that basically said that what we were was evil. And I grew up in the Bible Belt, so I grew up surrounded by really hardcore Pentecostal churches and Baptist churches, and I remember as a child I was clairvoyant as a child, and I basically put it in the closet. I mean, I'm like I can't handle this anymore. It's too much for me to handle, and it wasn't accepted. It wasn't accepted. And I remember going to church and saying that I saw dead people to my Sunday school teacher, and he was like, he gave me a Bible and he's like, read this, like it was like, you basically need to pray the ghost away,
Okay, and then in the Bible, how do they explain ghosts in the Bible? Spirits.
Exactly, and that's my defense. That's my defense now. I back then I didn't know. I didn't really. I viewed it as a curse and not as a blessing. And now I view it as a blessing. But it's taken me many, many years of acceptance and sort of going through a lot of trials and tribulations. I went through years where I try to drink the ghost away. I drank alcohol just to kind of stop the spirits from happening. And I've been sober for 13 years.
Congratulations and good for you.
Thank you. In that sobriety, though, is when I was able to kind of accept who I am as a clairvoyant. And it's been a long journey. It hasn't been easy, but and it's been scary too. Like when I first started, and you'll see in the shows as it progresses, and even in my books, I started off being like very terrified. I mean, I would walk into a haunted location and I would just like literally run out. Like there are shows where I recount my experiences with the paranormal, and it's like, I saw a ghost and I ran, and they reenact it, and it's so hilarious how dramatic it is. And truthfully, that's how dramatic I really was in real life. And as it progressed, I'm not as dramatic. I'm going to a lot of locations that terrified me for years. And we were talking earlier, I'm going to the Sally House for the first time. And I'll tell you, like, that's one location that I swore I would never go to. And I'm going with Richard Estep, who is a fellow author, in November. And I also went to the Hensdale House in New York, which is another location that terrified me as well. And so I this year has been about me conquering my fears, spending the night at locations that normally were major red flags for me as a clairvoyant.
Richard Estep interviewed me before he went to the Sally House.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, that's great.
I have probably more factual data about the Sally House than probably anyone in the country. I have over 1,000 pages of data on the house. And as you can see, I call it data, not evidence, because it's not evidence. It's actual historical fact. And because I'm big on fact. I like to present, this is what I know that's factual. We have a paranormal experience, great, but I'm more of a history type person, even though I see spirits and I talk to spirits. I'm a Gemini. I get both sides. And so I fight with myself on the fact that I'm a data-driven person, but that I see spirits that I can't prove to anybody else are there. So
you and I are on the same page, because that's been my passion, because I've been giving tours in Salem, Massachusetts for almost 10 years. And I wrote 2 books on Salem, and it's just so many myths and misconceptions associated with the Salem witch trials of 1692. I've had experiences there, but I've also have had to untangle the myths and misconceptions associated with what really happened in 1692. Like the number one for me was that I always get on my tours is, why do they burn the witches? And my mother even said that. She's like, Sam, why do they burn witches? And I'm like, Mom, they were not burned, they were hanged. And one gentleman was pressed to death over a 2-day period. So, and this is before, so this probably will, as we progress, I'm related to a lot of the people that I've been talking about for the past 10 years. So,
that makes it harder, doesn't it? Well,
it flipped my whole world upside down. I went from talking about the victims very passionately, also very factually as well. And it's so important for me to tell their story and tell their story correctly when I'm giving tours. And so I would tell those stories. We would cry on my tours. It was very emotional, a wonderful experience. And then to turn out that we're related to the Putnams, who were the major bad guys during the Salem witch trials. And my world just kind of flipped upside down. And that was just the beginning. And the way it started is I was actually doing a book signing or a book launch of my book, Wicked Salem, at the Hawthorne Hotel in Salem. And I get a call from my mother, and not to mock my mother. My mother's like 100% Southern. She's like, Sam. And my mom says my name with 3 syllables. Sam. I'm like, yes, mother. What's going on? And she's like, Sam, I think we burned witches. And I'm like, Mom, they weren't burned. They were hanged. Give me some names. And she gave me a couple of names. And then she said Putnam. And so we're directly related to the Priscilla Gould Putnam, who was the matriarch of the Putnam family. The Putnams were, in my opinion, the major accusers in the Salem witch trials of 1692.
That has to be amazing. And, I found my cousin found that my dad's family had been killed by Indians, by the Shawnee, but yet my mom's family is Cherokee and Blackfoot. So no wonder my parents didn't get along. Their history said, hey, this ain't gonna happen, people. So
well, isn't it funny like how these, like, I think it's in our DNA. It's like almost like it brings us together. And I do believe in I did a show called Curse of Lizzie Borden, and I'm also related to Lizzie Borden, and I'm sure that'll come up in this conversation as well. But the connections to Salem, I feel like I was called here. I feel like I grew up in Pensacola. My dad was in Chicago, so my parents divorced when I was younger. And then, so I started off in Chicago, and then moved back to Pensacola, and then moved here in the 90s. So I went to college here. I loved it in New England. There was something about New England and Boston specifically that called me here. And like where I felt like I was home. And now I know why I felt that, because I have generations and generations of family members that I didn't know about for most of my life that were connected to the Salem witch trials, to Lizzie Borden, and to other people.
That's amazing. I mean, I understand that. I had a major draw to 2 places, and I became volunteers at those 2 places. And there had to be a reason why. And I found out what it was, and it helped. And it was not due to relation. It was due to, hey, I need you. The spirits are saying to me, we need you to get the right people here to help us.
Yeah. I get that a lot. I get that too.
So the question I would have for you in that case is, once you find the right people for a location to help the spirits, do you have an obsession with that place until the problem is solved? Because I did.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were kind of talking about this briefly, before the show. So I had to pull myself out of Salem, to the point where I was so enmeshed in Salem. And it was great for my first book, Ghost to Salem. And then I wrote my second book called Wicked Salem. And so to the point where I was working an overnight shift at a hotel in Salem. I was giving tours in Salem. I was doing everything possible to really, see every aspect of the city that I learned to love. But it was almost like a bittersweet relationship, because I kept getting attachments. I mean, I got an attachment that nearly killed me back in 2017. I did a Halloween event, and I did like a mock seance where I was kind of showing what this is what a seance is. And I was trying to do like a how-to, and I ended up channeling Richard Crowninshield, who was a murderer in 1830. He murdered Captain Joseph White he took a large it was called an Indian stick, and he took the stick and whacked him, and then took a dirk and stabbed him around the heart 13 times. And I started channeling Richard Crowninshield, and not knowing that's what I was doing. I didn't know I had the ability to channel, which now is it's a tool that I use a lot when I go on investigations. but but I didn't push it out. So I basically allowed the spirit to kind of take me over, and then it stuck with me for 8 days, and it was horrible. I had to have a shaman remove it. My friend Joni Mahan actually did called Michael Robichaud, who did the removal, and I will say, like, after that removal, I was worried to go back to Salem. I didn't want to go back. I'm like, okay, I love you, Salem, but it's gonna kill me if I keep going back. But I do keep going back though.
Well, I can see that.
Yeah.
And some of the names that you said, I know those names. I've seen them on different shows, and I've interviewed Joni a couple times, and she is an excellent lady, very smart, got lots of information to share. And if you guys are near New Harmony, Indiana, you ought to go check out her ghost tours. First exit in Indiana, going west on 64. I used to take that drive a lot. My mom used to live in Eastern Kentucky, so I used to drive 64 at least once a year to go see my mom. So, but I know you've got some amazing stories, and we did have one question earlier in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and ask that. They asked, are you going to any haunted places? And you've already told us that you're going to the Sally House. Do you have anything else planned in the next couple months?
Yeah, so I actually have a jam-packed 2 to 3 months, actually. So I'm going to the Vulture City Paracon, which is in Arizona. I'm flying out this weekend, and we're going to do a weekend event with my good friends Jay and Marie Yates.
Interviewed them too.
Oh yeah, they're awesome. And what's really good about that is I've never been there, and so it's going to be a location that's kind of new and fresh to me. And also, a lot of people that I'm friends with on the West Coast are going to be there too. So like, I'm going to kind of finally connect with my West Coast friends that I'm only friends with on social media. So it's going to be I'm really looking forward to that. And then I'm going to Sleepy Hollow. I'm doing an event there on the 22nd, and that's going to be pretty much like a paranormal convention. And I'm doing the Farnsworth House. I do a show called Dead Ends. It's like a streaming live show with Richard Estep, with several April Doucette, who's a psychic medium, Ron Iacovetti, Lourdes Gonzalez, and Becky Galantine. And I make sure I get my entire crew. But we go to Haunted Inns, and we actually do a live stream from the Haunted Inn. So we're doing the Farnsworth House in Gettysburg on the 15th, actually no, the 14th of October. And then I'm heading to several locations. I'm going to doing an event in Salem in October. I'm doing my own convention called Mass Paracon at Concord's Colonial Inn on November 4th. So yeah, I'm going to a ton of haunted locations.
We walked by the Farnsworth House when we were in Gettysburg. Of course, I think I was in it probably back in '77. School field trip. You know, being from Baltimore, you know what? You get some of the best field trips to haunted places without even trying. You know,
that would be an amazing field trip. I would love that.
Yeah, like I said, we went there to the orphanage. We went to the battlefield, of course, multiples of those. What's funny is that I don't ever remember going to Antietam. And I found out back in 2018 that my cousin owns a house on Antietam that used to be a school. So I'm going to have to check that out sometime when I go back up that way. But yeah, I mean, have you ever been to like Washington, D.C. and saw any of the haunted locations there?
Yeah, so to kind of give you certain locations I'm drawn to, I go to DC actually a lot for whether it's conventions or just sort of getting pulled there for various things like work related stuff a lot. So a lot, but when I go to DC, I always try to go to other locations. Like I'll go to DC and then I'll go to Philadelphia, or I'll go to DC and then I'll go to Gettysburg. So I'll do like a one night in DC and then I'll go to the other locations that I'm heading to. So like when I'm going to the Farnsworth House, I'm actually going to fly into DC and then I just something about DC I'm drawn to. Like, do I think DC? I mean, the White House is haunted. Yeah, like I'm sure there's so many locations in DC. I stayed at hotels, and I kind of forget some of the hotels that I stayed at that were haunted. But I stayed at multiple hotels that are haunted. But then I go to Gettysburg. I would say like at least once a year. And I have gone to the orphanage. I had a really strange experience down in the basement area, the dungeon supposedly where the kids were kept. But I'll tell you, I channeled something down there, and I was with Richard Estep. We were both in this in the small dank area, and we were taking kind of like selfies in the area. And I ended up like whimpering like a child, like like that. And like Richard's like, "Sam, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I don't know what's going on, Richard." And my face it kind of morphed, and multiple people saw it. They saw my face kind of change shapes, and it was like I was channeling, and I was physically channeling whatever took me over for that moment, and it was a child, and it was a whimpering child. And whether or not I'm not sure if it was actually a child or if it was what we call, I'm sure you know about thought forms, but it's something that was created by telling a story over and over again. But something took me over, and it was scary. It's scary also the fact that like the idea that the phenomenon is called layering, where your face changes different shapes. But I do it a lot. I channel, and so when I channel, my face will literally contort to what that person looks like sometimes, and I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't want that to happen. But they kind of hijack me.
We actually have a picture of somebody that did that at the McPike Mansion. She was sitting right in front of us, and we were taking pictures, and they had just said, "Hey, you can take pictures in the dark." Just say flash. So we took a bunch of pictures, and this woman's face changed into something that I couldn't explain. And I don't see pareidoia.
Yeah.
I don't. I don't know about you, but I can't look at a picture and say I see somebody's face there if it's not really a face.
Yeah.
I'm not like that.
I'm very, what's the word? Even though like coming into the paranormal, I use the word alleged a lot. So like I'm a journalist, I'm a trained journalist, and I really take what I do as a journalist really seriously. So I want to get the facts correct. Now, writing about ghosts, it's so subjective. It could really, so many people have different interpretations. So many people claim to be experts. So many people, there's so many different directions you could take. But what you can do, and I like what you said, Denise, is that you focus on the facts. Like, what do we know? Like, what do we really know about this location and about the alleged spirits at the location? And do the facts back up the paranormal activity? And it's so important to me as a paranormal researcher and a clairvoyant to correctly tell their story, and whether or not it involves lots of fancy equipment, or if it involves dowsing rods or whatever. I want the stories to be told and told right, and that usually is validated in the history books, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes we have a story in Salem of a woman leading the blue dress that's spotted outside of Rockefeller's that's been seen by multiple people. I have a photo of her, and she looks like a lady in a blue dress with kind of a monstrous face. And the story is that she was killed in 1830 by her lover, and she basically said, "Hey, I'm pregnant," and her lover, who was a sailor, killed her because he didn't want to have a baby. She haunts that location, and we have proof of her haunting the location, but there's no historic proof that there was a woman murdered there. There's no lady in blue.
And why would he have to murder her? He could just go out on a ship and never come back. Just go to a different harbor.
We tell that story so much, Denise, that I think we created a monster. We created a thought form in Salem by telling her story over and over and over again. And she had the physical attributes of the thought form.
Like I said, I can see that happening because there is a lot of false legends is what they become. Somebody wants to have a story, because Rockefeller has been seen on lots of shows. I've seen them on scariest, most terrifying places in America.
Yeah, and I was on that. I was the one that told the story.
Right. and like I said, I saw that. Yeah. And it's, it looks like an amazing place to go. A little too expensive probably for me. I'm more of a Whataburger kind of person, but I would like to go there and see if I see anything. And if I didn't, okay, whatever. But, it is what it is. But like I said, there's a lot of stories out there that, when I was doing tours at the Sally House, I would give the legends, the TV show stories, than the facts, and told people, I don't care what you believe, but this is what I know. This is what I've heard. It's up to you to come up with the answer of what you believe. And that's how I always presented it, because, the legends is what gets people in the door, whether it's factual or not. So, and that's what people need to know. Those legends are what intrigued you to start with. What do you want to know after that? And some people, you're never going to change their mind on what they're going to believe. No matter how many facts you give them, they're not going to change their mind. So
right, and I think for me, like when it comes to for Salem specifically, there's so many myths and legends, and so the legends were really part of the Salem culture. We have so many ghost tours in Salem, and I'm sure at the Sally House you had a lot of tours and people coming in and out. Stuff was being stirred at the location, and stuff was being brought in by other investigators.
Mm-hmm.
So they were leaving their baggage there, and that's definitely the case in Salem. You have people with attachments walking in and dropping off their attachments. It's like, hey, you want to hang out in Salem? And I'm sure that happened at the Sally House. It happens at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast as well, and that's another location that's near and dear to my heart. Has new owners now, so it's definitely very, very different. I actually have not gone back since I shot a show called Curse of Lizzie Borden with Dave Schrader and Chris Fleming. And that was so traumatic, but also so like it was like the finale to years and years of research. It was time for me to cut the cord with my cousin Lizzie Borden, because it was just too much for me to handle after that. So I haven't gone back, but definitely a location that it's not just the original ghost. So it's not just the Borden family. I never thought ever that Lizzie Borden actually was in that house. I think that whatever's at that house that claims to be Lizzie Borden is what I call crazy Lizzie. She's like a splinter of what Lizbeth really was.
Well, I tell people all the time that if you go into a location and you call out to a spirit and they want to talk, they're going to answer to whatever name you call them.
Absolutely.
So that's that, and I've seen that, but it is what it is. So, but Steve Foster, he asked a question. He goes, "How do you reply to skeptics that refuse to believe in what you do?"
Well, when I first started out in the paranormal, I kind of identified with the skeptics. So I actually would do lectures at a lot of libraries. I even lectured at Harvard. I gave a lecture to a lot of skeptical people, and I always say that I write history books with ghost stories. So I really well crafted history books with ghost lore attached to it. So my purpose as a journalist and as an author is to educate people about Salem's history or about Lizzie Borden, the history of the murders. And the ghosts are kind of secondary to me. However, as someone that identifies as a clairvoyant, and that changes too, Denise. Like I started off as, I just kind of identified as someone that was very sensitive, and as I progressed, I started getting more powerful in my abilities, and I was nailing it. So to the skeptics, I say, go in with an open mind, and also view like what I do as an author as, a great way for the kids to learn about history. It's not scary. My books aren't scary. They're fact-based history books. And I think that a lot of the books out there, some of them are not great sources for history. A lot of the TV shows are definitely not great sources for history, as we've all seen. But I think that my books are. I think that when you pick up one of my books, you learn a lot about the history of a location, and that's because I spend months to years at the location to really dig deep for the stories and for the facts. So to the skeptics, you don't have to believe what I believe, but I say go in, and if you want to learn about the darker history of a location, then I'm the person that you want to talk to.
What is your, I know that you're doing research. What are some of your best sites to get some of that information that we're looking for?
Yeah, so I am old school, so I love libraries. Like that is my favorite. I know how to use a card catalog. Hello, people. The card catalogs are your friends, and so I literally I immerse myself in libraries when I do my research. Now, things have changed a lot when it comes to online. A lot of that stuff is digitized now, so I don't have to go to the library. But there's something about when I write a book, I have to go to a library for me to feel like I'm accomplishing something. So
well, it probably makes you more focused if you're there. That's one of the things I found.
It does. And you find stuff that is not available online. So you're going to find gems that are in a file folder and the special collections at the library that you're never going to find online. So I find gems at the library that no one has in their books because they don't do their research at the library. They do their research online. So I think that's my number one secret weapon. I think interviewing people is my second secret weapon. I think that someone that has interviewed people most of my life, you have to go out there, you have to talk to people. People will give you leads to other stories, and even the fact that I'm going to the Sally House and you worked at the Sally House, like this happens in my life. So like it's almost serendipitous that the right people kind of pop into my life when I need them, and they're like, oh, Denise knows about the Sally House, I'm going to go there, so maybe I can get the skinny on that. So that happens with my research too. Like people will automatically just pop up right when I need them when it comes to the research that I'm working on.
Yeah. So, and Steve says he goes, most books are just a rehash of older books, some the same stories and the same mistakes, which I've seen that in some books about Alton, Illinois. I've seen a lot where they've rehashed the same stories for 14 different versions of the same book and still never fixed all the typos. And I'm like, yeah. Okay, if you're not going to fix the typos, why change the story? Even a little bit, fix the damn typos. But that's me. I'm still a Gemini, and I'm a type A personality. I'm just like that. So, and I'm a perfectionist on many things.
Well, when I first started in writing paranormal themed books, I remember reading all the books. Like I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to read all these books. And so I read every book that was out there, and it was crap. It was literally it was poorly researched crap that was tons of typos. And I'm like, I can't be in this field. I mean, I'm a journalist. I was a stringer for the New York Times. I work for Newsweek. I work for all these great publications. I can't have my name associated with something that is this ridiculous. However, since then, things have emerged that I don't view as crap. I mean, Richard Estep, who you and I talked about earlier, he is amazing. And I work with him a lot, actually. And he's one of the few people that I actually trust as someone who gets the facts correct. And, and I've been with him. I've been with him in Gettysburg for one of his books. And I'm going to the Sally House to do the research with him on one of his books. So I think that there are people out there that exist that actually don't rehash the stories over and over again. And when I first started out, I wanted a comprehensive ghost book on Boston. I wanted a comprehensive ghost book on Salem. So you're going to rehash some of the stories over and over again. But then I went in a different direction. I went to more of a travel guide. So when you read my books now, I'm now on number 15, Related to Evil. It's basically my journey. So it's about me going to a location, me kind of like starting to do the research process and sort of the discovery that's involved with the haunted location. So it's more about my personal experiences and not rehashing the stories that have been in other books. So I get what Michael was saying about that, because that is kind of what a lot of the books are. But you mentioned Joni Meehan. Joni Meehan writes original books too. Like she does locations that haven't been written about, like New Harmony. I wrote about Salem, but believe it or not, there were not a lot of paranormal books on Salem.
Here he comes back.
Denise, you're froze up.
Oh.
You keep going on, Sam. Denise.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was like, I thought I froze up. I was like, did I freeze?
No, you didn't freeze. Denise's camera is froze up. So
well, yeah. So long story short, yeah, I write books that I feel really proud about, but they're different than what a lot of the other paranormal themed books are out there. And I team up with people that do the kinds of books that I like to read and that I like to write myself. So there's a group. We're kind of a group of people that are like-minded people who kind of stick together. We're kind of like the ghostwriters group, and like Richard Estep, Joni Mahan, Peter Muse, a lot of people in the community that you have been on your show. I'm good friends with, and we collaborate together.
Right. I mean, yeah, I haven't seen any of your books. I'm going to look them up later after we get off the show. But no, that's interesting. I like the way you're writing your books, that you're talking about how you're researching and going through your thoughts instead of the old stories and wise tales that's been told about the places.
Yeah, and Denise, that's kind of what I was talking about. So a lot of what I started out like that, but and I'm proud of those early books because I found stuff that the other books didn't have. So and that's because I go to the library, and that's because I would talk to people. I would literally interview hundreds of people for each book to get the different stories that aren't in the other books. But I have seen the books where it's been like a rehash, like the Alton, Illinois, over and over and over and over again. And I would love to, to go the way I do my books. I would love to go to a location like Alton, Illinois, and completely, like do a fresh take on it. What. That's what I do. I mean, I wrote a book on Salem. Salem, I was saying earlier, like wasn't really. Believe it or not, there's a lot of witch-related books about Salem, but there's not a lot of paranormal books on Salem. So I wrote the book on Salem's ghost, and so that it's not rehashed because it hasn't been written before.
Yeah, friends of mine used to do a radio show out of Salem called Haunted Salem. Way back in the day when I first started doing radio shows, I don't know whatever happened to them, but. It is.
And I wonder if they like the stories how they were back then versus they are now. Like I wonder if they've evolved over the years because that's the thing.
So. I would hope
that's
so.
the thing about Salem. All the stories in Salem are on the tours, and I've been a tour guide in Salem, so I know the stories. Some of them were based in fact, and some of them weren't. Some of them were completely fabricated, and a lot of the earlier tours, they almost kind of like created these stories, these narratives that were completely inaccurate, just because they were good stories.
That's what happened in Atchison. A lot of the stories were, they put together a book called Haunted Atchison, and it was written by the people in the town, just talking about this creepy house had this story, and and the original Sally House story, not the one that Deb and Tony Pickman told, but the one that the city told, was created by a previous mayor back in 1993 when they started doing their tours. Yeah, when they first started doing the trolley tours and stuff. And those people actually own a coffee company up there, Ghost Roast. And out of their basement, they do coffee out of their basement. So I'm pretty sure they don't grow coffee in Atchison. So I don't know what's going on there, but a place that you might want to check out if they'll let you. I don't even know if it's still a bed and breakfast, but directly across the street from the Sally House is the Glick Mansion. He was Governor Glick was the first Democrat governor of the state of Kansas, and so you basically have the governor living across the street from the Sally House, and the house next door, you have the guy he actually lived in the Sally House at one time, Charles Finney. He was the doctor that lived there, but he lived in the red house to the north. So when you go, make sure you pay attention to the red house to the north. That house was built by Dr. Finney's mother for him. because it was more befitting of a doctor and future mayor of the city of Atchison. And he moved in there in 1905. Supposedly, when right around the after or before the time that's the Sally stuff supposedly happened, and I'm supposing it didn't, but it is what it is. But yeah, you had a governor living across the street from the mayor. So it's an interesting story when you go into all of it. And one thing I tell people a lot is logic. Use logic when you're researching, because if something sounds fantastical, it probably isn't true. I was telling somebody the other day, they go, yeah, people are talking about this, and this. I said, well, if people are going to talk about me, make it a fantastical story, but just make people believe you. I don't care if it's true. Just make it sound make it unbelievable, So, but it's amazing, these stories that we tell over and over again. And like you said, they become something else at some other point. And are we doing damage to these locations by not telling the truth?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's really important. It's my passion, really, to tell the story and to tell the story correctly. And you have a location like Salem. Salem, has the witch trials of 1692. But I'll tell you, there's some documents lost. There's been so many stories, fill in the holes. Also, too, it was a dark chapter in New England's history. So they didn't want to talk about the accused innocent people of witchcraft, people that were accused of witchcraft in 1692. So it was something that wasn't talked about until the 1950s when Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible. It was sort of in vogue to talk about it again, and so there was 250 years of sweeping it into under the carpet and not talking about it. So as historians, a lot of people have really focused on original documents and getting to the facts. And I'll tell you, since I started, the facts have changed. Getting to what we thought was, for example, like Proctor's Ledge. When I first started, we were there's a place called Gallows Hill, and that's where the city of Salem wanted us to go to honor the innocent people where they were hanged for witchcraft. And it was a park, and it was with the playground. That's not where it happened. Actually, where the actual hangings took place is a place called Proctor's Ledge, which was down the street, but it was behind a Walgreens. So they didn't want it to be there because it was residential, but that's where it actually happened. And when you go to the location, it almost is a time slip. You can feel that something's not right at the spot where the hangings took place. And I actually wrote about this location behind the Walgreens before anybody else did. It was in my book, Ghost of Salem, and it was prophetic in a sense that it was 3 years before it went public. And that's from research. I did it from research. And I was able to pinpoint it, just like they had a team of researchers, and they did geodynamic, and I'm all you had to do is read the letters from Rebecca Eames, and it pinpoints the location. So I can't take credit for it because there was a whole team from Salem University that actually pinpointed it, but I did write about it 3 years before they did. So.
Well, that's really important. It's just so the first place in Atchison that was built was at right on the river, okay, and it's gone, of course, and then they built something else there, which became one of the first hotels in Atchison. It's now a restaurant, so when you go there, you get to go there. It's called the River House. It's been the Pepper Mill and the River House and some other things. Haunted place. We used to do tours there as well. And when you talk about this place, they neglect to tell you, well, they'll definitely tell you it was a brothel at one time. It was a women's hotel. So they'll tell you about that, but they won't tell you is the story of a Native American girl. She was 16. She ran off from her owner. Okay. You couldn't own slaves in Kansas, but you could own other people, especially Native Americans. She ran off from this guy who was trying to hurt her, and she actually killed him by accident. But she went to the brothel. Why? Because the local brothel was your women's safe house. The women would take care of them. And they hid her down in the basement. Well, the townspeople came and got her, drug her out of the basement, and hung her directly across the street from there, where it's now called MGP. But there was a tree out there that they had hung her on. And I found the whole story in the newspaper. But they had her as the bad guy because she had killed this guy, but she was trying to protect herself. I ended up actually channeling her in the basement of that place.
Yeah, the thing is, like, there's a lot of demonization, especially of women, and so you have to look at it with a modern lens. Mm-hmm. Like back when she committed the murder, Native Americans were savages, according to what the white people thought, and right. so it makes sense that she was demonized, but it's not PC, but it's also, we need to look at things with a modern lens. We have right. to undo the wrongs of our past, and really look at these innocent people who were demonized, like people, like the innocent people accused of witchcraft in Salem, or even like Lizzie Borden. Like, did she actually kill her father and her stepmother with a hatchet?
She was not guilty, so you kind of have to go along with what the findings were. And part of the things that I think the point that we're trying to make is we need to learn from our history to not repeat it. That's why we're Absolutely. Writing about the history, so that we can make people aware that, this lady, her story wasn't told completely. Same as where these people were hanged. You know where it was now, so you can go and pay homage to those people that were innocent, that died for no good reason, for fear. And that's the reason why I know that this young girl was killed, was because it was fear. What we don't know, we're afraid of. And so, and at that time in Salem, that's definitely what it was. I mean, I've seen a lot of things about Salem. Witches are now romanticized. They're romanticized and feared. Depends on which show you're watching, or laughed at. If you watch Sabrina the Teenage Witch, or if you watch Sabrina the Amazing Adventures of Sabrina, you get two different versions of the same character, but different.
Yeah, and even like a lot of the Salem witch trials, so these are based on innocent men and women, but you'll get archetypes or caricatures that are perpetuated in pop culture, like the three sisters. And like, we had three sisters that were accused of witchcraft in Salem. We had Rebecca Nurse, who was a lovely grandmother, and her sister Mary Eastie, and her other sister Sarah Cloyce, and they were three sisters that my cousin Aunt Putnam Jr. accused of witchcraft. Rebecca Nurse was hanged, and so was Mary Eastie. But those three sisters are perpetuated in pop culture, as in Shakespeare as well. But but also you have the three sisters in the Hocus Pocus, and multiple shows of the three sisters, the three witch sisters. And and Salem is full of dichotomies. I mean, we are talking about the location. The land is stained with blood, but you go there every October to and you wear a witch hat and you walk around Salem and scare each other. It's like
I've had people get offended that I'll wear a witch hat around Halloween, and it's like, so at this point I just go, it's not my witch hat, it's my bitch hat. That's it. So I don't say that I have a resting witch face. I say I have a resting bitch face, and it is what it is. But again, like I said, we've romanticized and demonized and all kinds of stuff with witches. And I know a lot of people now in my life that are Wiccan, and they're not at all like what history books back then made the witches out to be. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, so to kind of give you some backstory. So back in 1692, things were, everything was a hyperbole. So it was very much like, the devil was real, and also too, like the idea that witches were citing the devil's book goes back to the 1600s. It goes back to even back to England. So, and there was also a lot of in 1692 in Salem, there was a lot going on. So there was a famine going on. So there was a food shortage. There was a, the churches, people weren't going to church. And so they wanted to kind of scare people to go back to church. And so if you really look at some of the, like, I feel like some of the earlier accusations, it was about, it was church related. So even George Burroughs, he was the former minister of Salem Village, and he went off to Wells, Maine, to convert Native Americans to Christianity, and he was brought back, and he was said he was a devil himself. So, and this was the ringleader was my distant cousin Thomas Putnam, who was Ann Putnam Jr.'s father, and he actually like lent $400 to, or what's equivalent to about $400 to George Burroughs. So it was about money for him, and the reason why he had to borrow money is because they didn't pay him. So and the reason why they didn't pay him is no one was going to church. So there was a lot of desperation, a lot of fear. There was still the Native American raids, so people were getting killed. So if you look at a lot of the girls that were afflicted during the Salem witch trials, and afflicted, they were the ones that would have these visions of Goody Glover, sticking them with a pen, or they would convulse and bark like a dog. That I feel like that may be PTSD. It may have been a post-traumatic stress disorder. If you looked at it with a modern lens, like a lot of these girls lost family members from the Native American raids, and there was a lot to have trauma associated with back in 1692. So there was a lot of traumas, and also too that there was a lot of there's food shortage. There was a lot of jealousy. There was a lot going on.
Yeah, I can guarantee that. So we do have a question here I'm going to ask. And this is from Carl. He asks, what are they going to say about all the victims of mass shooting in the paranormal in 20 years?
Well, I will say this. I have a rule that I don't talk about the paranormal. It has to be 50 years for me. So out of respect for the family members, and out of respect for, just the people that were killed. I think it's really important for us not to, pull out a spirit box and start trying to communicate with them. Like,
I agree. Because the last thing I want to do is be accused of trying to have a spirit box session with the Queen when she just died. And we know that happens every time somebody big dies. We have somebody in the paranormal that I guess thrives on negative attention. So here we go. Here's another question. One of the things that is particularly fascinating here in New England is that there are so many descendants and relations to the stories that are told. Sam is always mindful of that and keeps a lot of respect and integrity in his writing. So you got a very good compliment there.
Yeah, and Roxy Zwicker, so that's from my friend Roxy Zwicker. Roxy actually is a fellow ghostwriter. And so I was mentioning people that I trust in the paranormal field, and Roxy is one of those people. And she's actually one of the first people to write about the paranormal before I started writing about the paranormal. And so she's a tour guide that turned into an author and is well respected. So thank you, Roxy, for saying that. And she also she's on my list of people that I respect in the paranormal.
So, I was talking about some of this with my husband, that, they talk about haunted schools and things like that. And, one of the very first school shootings that we'd heard about that was public was Columbine in Denver, not too far from Richard Estes, currently anyway, unless he's moved. Actually, he did move. I forgot where, but
he's still in Colorado, though.
Yeah, I knew he was still in Colorado, but he's not near Denver. And I just wonder how that is going to be then. Now the place in Las Vegas where all the people got killed in that mass shooting. My daughter was supposed to be there that night. She was living in Vegas at the time. And we would drive by that lot prior to all that happening. And I told Ron, I said, that lot was haunted before all this. I said, I just don't know how haunted it's going to be after. You know, I'm very concerned. No, Sandy was after Columbine.
Yeah. So it's kind of like some similar. I lived in New York City during 9/11. And so imagine being an empath or clairvoyant and watching the towers fall and then also seeing the victims, you know.
I don't have to imagine that.
Yeah, it was horrific. It was horrific. And the thing is, would I ever write about that? Maybe in about 30 years. Do I think that the land, like you can still feel their energy there? Absolutely. It's residual in nature. And I mean, you could taste it. I mean, it was in the air when I lived in New York City. So it was horrible. It was horrible. So I think out of respect for the victims, it's really important for us to I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Denise? I mean, I think it's important to tell the stories.
I think it's important to tell their stories, but the fact is that I know that the guy who built the Sally House, the great great grandfather of MC Finney built that house. He still has family members alive, living in Washington State. They didn't even know that was that when they talked about the Sally House, that it was their family that they were talking about until I told them. So, the thing is that gave me, knowing that there may still be family members alive should make people respect a location more. And I think that's where you're going is there are still, like you're part of the Putnam family. We still need to respect our families, even though they've been long dead for 100 years.
Yeah. So I have a rule. So it's 50 years for me. So if and there's some times where I break the rules. Like I wrote a book called Mass Murders, and a lot of the cases were historic crimes, but there are some cases that were cold cases that I feel like that we needed to revisit, like the Lady of the Dunes in Provincetown. We don't know who she is. So by telling her story, maybe somebody will go, oh, I know about this. I know about the backstory. So I think sometimes in some cases it's important. But getting back to what will we think about 20 years later? I think that, as someone that's sensitive, you're going to pick up on the energy no matter what. So if you have any ounce of sensitivity in you, you're going to feel the energy at the locations. And it's good. Are they disembodied souls there? No, I don't think so. I've been at I would say hundreds, but I would say like dozens of locations that were crime scenes. And what's interesting is the perpetrators are the ones that usually haunt those locations, not the victims, because the perpetrators have guilt. So it's the victims don't haunt the locations. I believe in my heart that they go to heaven. They go to a better place. And I don't think that trying to, say, how did you die with a spirit box? I'm going to start crying because this is what people do. They actually go to these locations and how did you die? And they were shot. And why do we need to do that? And so to me, people like that give us a bad name.
Well, there are some out there that are doing that daily. So,
yeah.
And I agree. I can't even go there on some things, I'm going to just say we agree that there should be a limit before you start bringing up stuff. One of the things that I always tell my husband, or people will ask me, what is a place you'd love to investigate? I said, I'd love to investigate the place where my father was murdered. It has not yet been 50 years. My sister, my family members are still alive. I don't want to, people know that my grandfather was a serial killer, but yet my family does not know that. because they did not research him like I did.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. But my dad was murdered less than 50 years ago.
Oh my God.
Dead 47 years and 3 months. He was murdered by his own father.
That's insane.
So, yeah,
was it in Maryland or?
Yeah, it was in Baltimore, and in a row home on Harriet Street. I lived in that house. I actually lived with my grandfather at one time, and I was treated like gold. Okay, I was never spanked. I was never yelled at. Nothing. And so this, it came as a shock, even though I had seen stuff, not personally, but out of body experiences. I had out of body experiences when I was 4 and 10 that I saw my grandmother be murdered by him. I saw my father be murdered by him. Things like that. And I'm relatively well adjusted, to say the least. But I would like to investigate that location. I would like to get more information on why this happened. Besides, hey, this is what I know. Everything that I know has been proven. All the experiences that I had in my out of body experience, every single one of them was proven to be true by witnesses that were there. Long story short, my dad's girlfriend verified it with me and my mom, and other people that were there verified it later on in life, when I ran into them and told them what I was seeing or what I saw, and they agreed. When you come down to that, not a lot of people want to investigate someplace that they've lived.
I mean, Denise, I think you have to. I mean, I think it's a location that it's almost like all the pieces of your life, and this kind of reminds me of my story too, is leading you to ultimately revisit the place where you came from. So it's like a full circle. I think it's really important for you to do that eventually.
I will. I haven't been back to Baltimore since 1989. So that tells you something. Since I had kids, it's just not been that important to go back. But it's an interesting story. Someday I should write a book about just the weird things that happen in my family.
So, having that, you're related to evil. I'm related to evil. You're related to evil. We could both write a sequel to Related to Evil.
Well, Jeff Mudgett sat down and talked with me, and he goes, I want you to do a TV show with me. And I'm like, my family's not ready.
Yeah.
My family's not ready. So I'm not going to do that. So it is what it is. But, when you talk about that kind of history, it's factual. There's so much stuff that you get a lot of people go, I'm sorry for your loss, or I'm sorry that you went through. I'm sorry, but all that stuff made me who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of who I am. I've never been to jail. I've never done anything to disrespect my family throughout all this. I can't say that about everybody, but I can say that about me. And I'm proud of myself because, losing your father in 1975, being raised by a single mother after that, and she had 3 daughters. It was really hard in 1975 to be a single mother. Can you imagine being in elementary school and, junior high school, going to school that first time with the news crew following you around?
That's definitely like you definitely need to revisit this, Denise. And I think when you were talking about even leaving your body, I had that too, but I had it for cases that happened 150 years ago. So I think it's like almost like genetically, I think it's in our DNA. Like, I think it's like, there's something about our connection to our loved ones. It's so intense that yours is definitely more recent, and you knew the people that were involved. I didn't know the people that were involved, and it was like kind of like trying to piece together, like, who is this? What is this, and why am I getting messages from this woman? This woman. And I remember, like, I had multiple nightmares about Lizzie Borden, the house, before I even knew about the case. I mean, it was like I would have wallpaper. I would see this wallpaper, and it turns out that was the wallpaper in the house in Fall River. And I would see a woman, and she would be kind of peeking around the corner, and it was Lizzie Borden. So I do think that there's I had similar things, but like our stories are, of course, are different, but they're not. They're just separated by 200 years.
Yeah, years and distance.
Right.
But when you had an out-of-body experience where you went back in time.
Yeah, I mean, I had, so this is weird. I want to kind of like explain, like, so when I was a kid, I was super sensitive. So I was like the kid from The Shining. I would always have, like I would have like a friend that like would hang out with me, and she was like my friend, but she was a ghost friend. She wasn't a real friend. And we would like we would outside and play and all that. And then so my grandfather passed away. So I ended up going back to Pensacola. So my parents divorced. I go back to Pensacola. I'm staying in my grandfather's room, who is my spirit guide now, by the way. But he's also the connector to all the like Lizzie Borden and to the Putnams. Charles Hughes is his name. And my granddaddy, so I slept in his room. I got like a download from him. I don't know what I mean by that, but I got all this information, and some of it was terrifying, but that he passed on to me. And after that was almost like that was the beginnings of my journey. Like he passed on his wisdom to me, and some of it was terrifying. Some of it was like end of the world stuff, like that I didn't want to see. But I physically left my body, and like I was in the bed, and I was like I left my body in that situation, and then my life hasn't been the same since. So a lot of it was just too much information for me to handle. But a lot of it came true.
Well, that's. I was gonna say that's unusual, but it's not.
It's not. I mean, like,
it's what it is.
Yeah, and if I can like equate it to something, for me it was almost like it was like a download, but it was also like pictures. So when someone says your life flashes in front of your eyes before you pass, I almost got to see what he saw before he passed. Like it was almost like that lifetime of imagery, and also thoughts and fears and everything that just kind of downloaded to me. And I remember, and then he would sit on the corner of the bed. We would have conversation, and I didn't know him. I was in Chicago when he died, so I didn't really know my grandfather. And the fact that I had a relationship with him after he passed was kind of, my mom was like, "Who are you talking to?" And I'm like, "Granddaddy." She's like, "Okay, son."
So how old were you when your grandfather passed?
I was 4.5, 5. So I was young. And then we moved back when I was 7. I moved back because my dad was in the Navy. So I was born in Pensacola, but we moved to Chicago when I was an infant.
Like I said, well, I'm glad you're a Navy brat, because this whole network is veterans.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Like my dad, who just passed away in January, he was a Navy vet. My grandfather, also Sam Baltrusis, he was a Navy vet as well. So I have a long line of Navy vets in my family.
Well, thank your family for their service. I guess Grandpa already knows that we appreciate that. So when it comes right down to it, when you say you're clairvoyant, what has been the most amazing message that you have gotten from a spirit?
That's a hard one, because I've gotten so many messages. I think for me, I've been stalked in Salem by this figure that wears a hat and has red glowing eyes. So I know that sounds terrifying, but to me, that I've learned, I've done shows about this encounter with the man with a hat. I've learned to view him as not a bad guy. And I know that sounds weird, but he's a harbinger. So it's almost like he's telling me that someone's about to die, or I need to look out for a loved one. Because every time I've seen the man with the hat, a family member's died. So it's like a harbinger. So I think for me, it was the most terrifying encounter, but it's almost like my warning that something's about to happen, and like get home, or so I'm grateful for that. Now I know how to interpret it because it's happened multiple times, and every time it's happened, either my stepfather, who was also a big part of my life, basically raised me in addition to my mother. He passed the first time I saw the man with the hat. My biological father, who was a Navy vet, he passed when I saw the Hat Man again. So he's been a harbinger. So I would say that's been the most like profound experience, but also not going from being terrified of it to viewing it as a harbinger and as someone that I need to I take seriously and like not be like run away from. He's trying to give me a message. I also think that I've had lots of communication where it's been like I don't know what they're trying to tell me, but then it makes sense years later. Like, you know, like being connected to the Lizzie Borden, having the dreams and the spirit communication with Bridget Sullivan, and also having communication with the victims of the Salem witch trials for many years. And like I would go on my tours and people would say, Rebecca Nurse is right behind you, like, and I'm like, okay. And also kind of being oblivious to that too, because like I would tell their story, but I was almost like I was channeling them while I was telling their story.
Well, I'm going to take a break right now. We have a paranormal conference coming up here in this weekend that I want to make sure people know about, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Brandon here, host of Shaman Sundays. Join me every Sunday as we discuss everything from the paranormal to self-healing. We'll sprinkle in a couple of fun guests along the way. Show airs 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central every Sunday, right here on the Bill of Rights Network. #born. Join me, won't you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rex.
And I'm Shane.
We have a new show on the Bill of Rights Network. It is called Music, Movies, and Maybe More.
We explore bands that we've heard of that a lot of people haven't, that we feel like you should know about.
And we do the same with movies. There's a lot of movies out there that we know about that other people should know about as well.
And as for the maybe more part, you never know what else we can come up with.
So, on the Bill of Rights Network, every Saturday night, live at 7 p.m. Central Time, Music, Movies, and Maybe More will be on. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you there. Now we'll return you back to Paranormal Pride and Denise Pridemore.
Welcome back, everyone. And on that paranormal conference down there in Joplin this weekend, your very first speakers are going to be me and Ron, and at 1:00 p.m. So make sure you're down there on Friday to hear me talk. It'll be interesting when I come up with something to talk about. Actually, no, I'm going to be talking about, let's see, how to spot a fake psychic medium.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's all going to be opinion, but it is what it is, you know. Yeah, because I mean, do you have any tips on how to spot somebody who's faking?
I will tell you this. So it's taken me 50 years to. I mean, not really literally 50 years, but it's not something I wanted. You know, I don't want to have sensitivity to the paranormal. So the part for me is like it's really frustrating when you see people at a gallery, for example, and the psychic medium is like, like I'm getting a J name. I'm getting a J name, and then someone like raises their hand and like, oh, my dad's John, and you could see them. I'm like, that's horrible. Like you can see the techniques that they're using, and I don't do that. I don't do galleries. I don't do fake, connections. It just, to me, it's like, that's like, why would you waste your energy on that? Like, that's ridiculous. And also, these people are looking for comfort, and they're looking for words from their loved ones, and I think that that's so wrong on so many levels if they are in fact faking it. I do think some of these people, this is what I think, that some of them are gifted, but they're not always on. And I know that I'm not always on. I think that I have many days where you put me in a location, I don't get anything. So the biggest tip I found, if they're always on every time that they're at a location, that's a red flag that they're not legit.
Yeah. And I've seen that because, I'll have people just recently asked me a question, and it's like, I'm sick. I don't feel anything right now. I can't even focus on myself, much less something, a spirit at this point. And I mean, I'm totally honest with people. If I'm not getting something, I'm not getting something. Yeah. And I don't get something all the time, but when I do, it's usually right on target. And that's the way I would much rather be right than give bad information. So,
and that's how I am too. I mean, I feel I've only done 2 shows where I've been a psychic medium on the show. I'll be honest with you, I'd rather be a talking head talking about the history. I don't like being the psychic medium on the shows because you get ripped apart. You get people that are like, I don't believe in psychic mediums, and I'm like, and these are psychic mediums that say this. I'm like, oh my God, really? Like really?
Well, I did not know this. Okay. So this will tell you something. I did not know that all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. And I'm like,
yeah.
How do you know that? So that's
I don't predict the future. So I'm actually not a psychic. I see the past. So I've said I'm a psychic time traveler. I've used that before. People are like, what? But I have traveled back in time. Like I'll have visions because I do psychometry. So I'll touch something and I'll have like flashbacks to what happened sometimes. And it's not all the time, but when it happens, it's profound.
Can you explain psychometry a little bit? Because I know that we have been watching, we as in our network, all of us have been watching Ghosts of Devil's Perch because we're all friends with Katie Stafford. And because he lives here. We live in the Kansas City area. He lives in the Kansas City area. So, and we know that Cindy Kaza is on there, and she does psychometry readings. Can you explain a little bit more about what psychometry is?
Yeah, so my skill set's very similar to Cindy's. And I'm also I did a show with Dave, so I don't know Cindy well, but I have a lot of respect for her. I think she's the real deal. I really do think she's gifted. So psychometry is when you get mind pictures when you touch something. So I have a crystal. So if this crystal was involved in a crime scene, and I touch it, and I'll have a vision. I'll see pictures, like mind pictures of what happened in 1842 when that murder took place, or whatever the case was. So you'll get mind pictures. Also, too, you'll get she does automatic writing as well, which I don't do. That's sort of like using spirit to kind of communicate what they're trying to say. It's just something that's not part of my repertoire. But I channel, and she doesn't channel. So So getting back to psychometry is just a way of connecting, but it's usually residual and it's energy attached to the object.
I would say that her automatic writing is the same as channeling. She's just channeling it into her pen and paper as opposed to channeling it into her self.
I will say automatic writing is safer, but if you watch Curse of Lizzie Borden with me, Dave Schrader, and Chris Fleming, it wasn't safe for Dave Schrader. Dave Schrader fought it, and he started convulsing at the table. So it's not safe for everybody, but I think if you ask Cindy, like why does she automatic write versus channeling? Because you get your spirit, your body's taken over. And if you watch me in Curse of Lizzie Borden, I'm crying throughout the whole show. I mean, it's like, and everyone's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No," because I was legitimately channeling. So it wasn't my emotion; it was Eliza Borden's emotions that I was picking up, and she was emotional. And I remember like coming out of the trance that I was in, and my eyes were swollen from crying so much. And I'm like, what the hell happened? And I saw the video, and I'm like, I couldn't believe that's what came out of my mouth. Because some of it was I remember, but some of it I don't. I remember having a conversation with Eliza, but I don't remember. I don't remember crying like that.
Oh, I find the Lizzie Borden case to be amazing. I've watched so many things on the actual trial. I did watch the one show that they had where they were at the Lizzie Borden house with Chip Coffey. Didn't care for that one. Not that I didn't care for Chip. I just didn't care for the show. I just didn't think that it was done well. Have you been
I
to...
agree.
How about the other house that Lizzie Borden owned after that house? Have you ever been in there?
Yeah, if that's in the show Curse of Lizzie Borden, we started off at the bed and breakfast on 2nd Street, and then we went to Maplecroft. I've been there multiple times. The owners that own the bed and breakfast at one point owned the Maplecroft house as well. Her spirit is there. It's not going to be at the murder house. In fact, communicating with my distant cousin, she said over and over again, "Don't call me back to that house. Like, don't call me back to the murder house." Her spirit was at Maplecroft. And if you wanted to really connect to Lizzie Borden, you really wanted to know Lizbeth as she wanted to be called, you go to Maplecroft. So yeah, I know Maplecroft very well, and I had more profound experiences at Maplecroft and more informational experiences at Maplecroft compared to the murder house.
Have you ever been to the Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca, Iowa?
I have not, and that's come up over and over and over again because now that I know that I have hatchets in my history, but I think that there's something tying them all together. There's the Axeman in New Orleans. There's the hatchet murders at the Villisca murder house. So there's something going on there. You could argue that that's a sign of the times, that people had hatchets in 1892, and that they did. They had hatchets was a part of a normal thing to have. But I also I'm as a clairvoyant, I'm getting weird ties to all these murders. I don't know why, but I just am.
Well, the Villisca Axe murders, when they happened 4 days before, there was a murder of a married couple in Paola, Kansas, which is just 17 miles from here.
Yeah.
And my husband's mom lived near Red Oak, Iowa, which is about 17 miles from there, from Villisca. And the sheriff in the investigation was my husband's great uncle. So we have a direct connection to the Villisca Axe murders. And one of the things that I feel there is sometimes I feel the children there. Sometimes I feel the parents there. And I don't know if it's because maybe the children didn't cross over because they didn't know what to do. But again, I also have this feeling like children would cross over automatically because God would take care of that. But I know that's not true. No. But we've had different instances where, like I said, where I felt the children, where I felt the parents, and times that we've, come across, who we feel is may have done it. Okay. the question is how do we validate something like that? Like, how did you get anything like that when you were at the Lizzie Borden house? Anything to validate maybe who did do it if it wasn't Lizzie?
Yeah, I mean, like the Lizzie Borden case is going to be the ultimate. It's the ultimate whodunit. For me, it's not who done it, but why she did it. I'm convinced that Lizzie Borden did take an axe and kill her father and stepmother. The thesis of the Curse of Lizzie Borden is that she had an attachment or was under the influence of a sinister force, and that's something that I know that not everyone agrees with that. But it's something that we looked into in the documentary, and I feel like if you look at my family lineage, it's stained with blood. I mean, there's a lot of blood in my backstory. We have Eileen Warnos is connected to us. We have Marilyn Monroe. We have Innocent Cornell, whose father was, who supposedly killed his mother. There's a lot of death in my family, and a lot of them are women. And so I think she did it, but could it be mental illness? Could it be like, and that's what a lot of people think it was. We had Eliza Borden, who I was talking about earlier, who I channeled, who I never really connected with before as a clairvoyant, who took a straight razor. She killed her children first by throwing them down a well, and took a straight razor and cut her own neck. And this was right next door to the murder house, and that's proven. Like that's in the history books. So yeah, I mean, I think that we're never going to know for sure. We can come up with really strong, like we can go to the facts. And I was actually talking to my good friend who is a Lizzie Borden researcher who spent his whole life researching the case, and he still doesn't know. It's like we don't know. There's nothing. We're never going to know definitively why, who killed Abby and Andrew Borden, or why they did it. All we can do is really look at the facts. I will say this, something that came up recently in my research is that I'm actually doing an event at the church where Lizzie Borden taught Sunday school. And at the church, there was a newsletter that talked about Lizzie Borden, and Lizzie Borden had an accident about 2 months before the murders in 1892, where a dumbwaiter fell on her arms and broke her arms. I mean, like, her arms were, well, not broken, but they were badly bruised, but they thought they were broken. So that happened about 6 weeks before the murders. How can she hold an axe and kill 2 people, and that savagely?
Why didn't that ever? I don't ever remember hearing that in any of the documentaries that I've watched.
It's new evidence. And that's the thing, like, there's always new stuff that comes up. If you dig hard enough, you can find new stuff. And that's the thing, like, I feel that about the Salem witch trials. I think that we're still finding out information about the Salem witch trials because you have people that are dedicated to looking at every possible resource. And we unfortunately don't have original people that are still alive from the Salem witch trials era, but we did when it came to Lizzie Borden. Like, that was like the crime of the century. Like, there was a lot of people that were talked to that we could maybe, they're not alive now, obviously, but maybe we can have access to those interviews or letters or something can surface, like right. This newsletter at the church. Like, no one thought about looking at the newsletter at her church.
Well, I understand that because, a lot of the information that I've got about, the McPike family and the Finney family all came from newspapers around the country. Newspapers.com is a great resource for finding things like that. Local directories are invaluable on location, finding a location, especially if it was a house or a business. You can find that stuff in old directories, and they had directories long before there were telephone books. It was just addresses, and church directories are the best, because they tell you all kinds of crap that you didn't even know you needed to know.
Well, it's really funny, like the way that they, like, it was a newsletter. It was almost like a gossip column. It's like, the lovely Lizzie Borden, daughter of Andrew Borden, was daintily putting her hands in it was like the way it was written, it was almost like a gossip column. And I'm like, she almost broke her hands in the dumbwaiter. Like, that's what they were trying to, like, flower it up a little bit, I guess. And And
and that's how
newspapers
really were back. Back then it was, this person came to town to get some horses. They're staying at the hotel. They're going to be here for 5 or 6 days before they go to wherever. And it was like, was the reporter waiting at the ferry as soon as they came across the Missouri River to interview them to find out why they were in town?
Right.
And getting to that, you got to do something kind of similar. You had a famous person at, you said that you were serving coffee to her every morning. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, well, so I worked at Concord's Colonial Inn, and I made it not public because I didn't want to go public. I made it like private for just my friends because it's kind of a cool thing. But yeah, so I actually worked at Concord's Colonial Inn, and a lot of movies were shot in Massachusetts. So Sarah Jessica Parker stayed at the hotel while I was writing my book, Mysteries of Concord's Colonial Inn, and then also there's a cast of the movie called The Parenting, which actually is about a poltergeist haunting a family. And it was ironic that I write about ghosts and the cast that is in the show or in the movie stayed at the end with me. So not only was it Sarah Jessica Parker, she was only there for a couple of days, but the cast from the movie called The Parenting, and keep an eye on that because it's going to be a great movie. It's with Parker Posey, Lisa Kudrow, Edie Falco, Brandon Flynn, a lot of people that I loved as as performers are in this movie, and I got to know them very well. And I actually got to do a seance for Parker Posey and Brandon Flynn and Nick Diodani at Concord's Colonial Inn.
And Jailbird has her name's Barbara. She says the newspapers add to the story. She goes, she was interviewed and there was a lot of things they said I never said. And it's like, yep, they changed the words that I said on Ghost Adventures to fit what they wanted it to fit. So and once you sign that in the little dotted line, it's their footage. It's not yours anymore. So.
And that's important because we were I have been very lucky that my representation on television has been very good. I had one incident where I was giving, I did a segment on Salem. It was called Haunted USA, where my words were cut and twisted to make it work for what they wanted to say. And they changed the person I was talking about from Mary Corey to Martha Corey. And so that has happened to me. And I think that I think that I always say, like, don't take television, don't view it as a history lesson. But I will tell you this: I try to make my appearances on television a history lesson. I think it's important as someone that writes about history and about ghosts. So when I have that platform to somehow get in a little bit of history, and so people can kind of learn something while I'm crying about whatever I'm crying about on the show. But she's right though. She's like, I think I was a journalist, so it's important for me as a journalist to correctly tell their story, and that includes living people too. So if I interviewed people and I incorrectly understood what they were trying to say, and I've written probably about 20,000 articles in my career. I've interviewed so many people, and I feel good about all the interviews that I've had, but I'm sure there's one person that said, "Oh, I didn't say it like that," or I didn't mean it like that. But I will, if you're a trained journalist, you're going to get it right. If you're a TV show producer, I don't know. I mean, I've seen stuff change, and I've been changed when I've been on television.
So, what advice could you give to someone who is interviewing a lot of people? What is, there's got to be some piece of advice that's really important when you're interviewing a person.
I think it's really important. I'm old school in the sense that I was trained old school journalism ethics. It's really important that you record the interview, that you engage with the person. So I think a lot of times when people are interviewing, they're not listening. They're just writing down what they're hearing, but they're not really listening what the person's saying. So I think you have to have strong listening skills. You have to engage in the conversation instead of having your list of questions and just kind of going next question. Engage with it. If the person wants to go in a different direction, let them go in a different direction. And that goes for the ghost too. I mean, that goes for the ghost wants to focus on not the murders, but focus on her locket that's in the closet, buried in the backyard. I'm going to go there because that's what the spirit wants. And I think that my best advice is to go with the flow and not to try to force the interview, and to let them have their say. And I think that will make everybody happy, and you'll be able to still craft a story out of what you're doing. But what you see, and you see this especially in the television world, they have the producers come in, and I've been a television producer myself. I was a producer for A Haunting on the Travel Channel, but they come in and they have this preconceived notion of what they think should, what they want the story to be, and usually it involves demons or demonic attacks or something, and that's not what really happens. So it's important for the producers to really listen to who they're interviewing, and my advice is to don't say anything that could be used against you. So for example, the producer is going to say, Sam, do you think it was a demon? And I'm like, no, it's not a demon. And then they'll change the words, it's a demon. And I've seen that happen, not to me, but to other people.
Yeah. If you ever decide to watch the Sally House episode of Ghost Adventures, and when I'm talking, you can hear when they did it. It's obvious. But only thing I ever tell people is I'm the first voice you hear on that episode. So when they're just started off, you just hear me yapping. And it's like, okay. I was just excited to be in. I was excited to be part of it. I never cared if I got on TV, to be honest. I thought going through the process was interesting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people think that, people that are in the paranormal, their only motivation is to be on television. And I don't like being on television. It's not my motivation. My motivation is to tell the stories of the people that I'm passionate about. I want to tell their stories and tell their stories correctly. And I think that's what you're saying as well. Like, you wanted to be part of the process. You wanted to see how it really happens. It wasn't to be on television or to be famous or whatever. And I think a lot of people think that. And I think a lot of people who aren't on television, they're jealous of people that are. And I'm like, write 15 books, then maybe you can maybe get on television. It's like my best advice for people that want to be on TV, don't want to be on TV. Just do your thing. Just keep going out there, keep researching, and keep writing. And that's how the people that do that are the ones that end up on television.
I'll tell you, I just enjoy. Well, the reason that they had me on was because something horrible happened to me. That's the reason. They needed to make it look like a demon was in that house. And I'm not saying there wasn't, but there was something really dark in there, something that was hurting me over and over again, eventually throwing chairs at me and scratching me and pushing me downstairs. And most of it was witnessed by other people. It wasn't just me saying, hey, this happened. It was witnessed. And, so it makes for a good story. I mean, let's be honest. If it wasn't a good story, nobody would have been telling it. And, but it is what it is. So how many books have you written? 15?
Yeah, 15 altogether. My most recent book is called Related to Evil. And it's chronicling my journey of learning about my connection to the Salem witch trials and to Lizzie Borden and to Marilyn Monroe, which has just been confirmed through DNA testing in 2022 that she's connected to our family line as well.
What do you think about going back and testing people to see if they had the serial killer gene?
Well, I will tell you this. So part of my research on Lizzie Borden is, one of the perks of kind of going public with my family relation is everyone that's related to Lizzie Borden has kind of come out of the woodwork, So they're like, I'm related to Lizzie Borden too. And so I'm getting all these messages, and I'm becoming friends with these people. And there is a gentleman who's a doctor in California, and I forget his name, but he's a fellow Lizzie Borden descendant. He actually does brain scans on family members, and a lot of the brain scans within our family lineage are different than other brain scans than the normal brain scans. So they're like serial killer brain scans.
See, I'm interested in that the serial killer gene. I think it's
Yeah.
MAOA, and I'm kind of interested in that because, you know, having something similar in my own family. Do we have a gene? Is this the reason why I can be fine 1 minute and the next minute flying off a handle? And I don't. I mean, my sisters do, but no, I get upset.
You're a Gemini. Come on, Denise.
Yeah, I know. I go both ways. I'm happy 1 minute, I'm pissed off the next, and it is what it is. But I can stay even keeled most of the time.
Right.
I can control a lot of things, but I just wonder if, you know, say Jeff Mudgett was able to find out where H.H. Holmes is really buried and get some DNA. Can they find out if that gene's in his, you know, in that, you know, in that sample? You know,
well, I mean, I would be interested in Mr. Mudgett getting his blood tested for the serial killer gene. You know, like does it pass through our blood? I know, like from the brain scans. And to me, the brain scans are more fascinating because I think that the brain scans are indicative of a serial killer. And finding that people within the Borden line that are direct descendants in this curse line, which includes Eileen Wuornos and Marilyn Monroe and myself, we all have different brain scans, and it's not all of us. It's weird. Like some of us do, some of us don't. And what's also interesting too, Denise, some of us, like out of all the people that I've met that are related to Lizzie Borden, we are either journalists or investigators. We have like the hunter gene. Like we hunt for things. And you know, I don't hunt ghosts. Ghosts hunt me, but I do hunt for information, and I love the thrill of uncovering that, you know, like that one newspaper article that no one else has written about before for one of my books. So I have the gene. It's just not, you know, hunting people. It's hunting, you know, information.
That's kind of like me. Once I get into researching something, it's kind of hard to get me out of it. I'm on a track until there's a reason to stop. But it's amazing how one piece of information can lead you to 15 others.
Well, I mean, having looked at people in my lineage, and a lot of them are professors and, you know, investigate, like really high profile people. I would say that, you know, you've kind of taken what you've been given from your grandfather and have turned it into a positive, you know, like it's whatever, like that obsessive mind, we can take it and obsess on negative things or positive things. And to me, uncovering research is very positive. So I think that you can go either way.
So my next question for you is, when you're researching and you're at the library or wherever, what is besides the card catalog, nobody knows the Dewey Decimal System anymore.
I know, right?
I mean, even though I worked in the library for a while when I was growing up, but how do we start? I mean, what do we start with?
Well, I mean, when I was in college,
be an outline is what I'm going to start with. But what do you suggest?
Well, I mean, for years I used a thing called LexisNexis. So you basically do a search on LexisNexis, and you would uncover all these articles. So to me, like the articles are really important. So you're not going to get that in the card catalog, but you will get that in LexisNexis. So for me, special collections is a gold mine. So because I live in Boston and even in Salem, like there's what they call the Salem room and at the Salem Library. And it's strange. Nobody that writes these books on Salem goes to this amazing library that has an amazing collection of articles on Salem for almost 100 years. So I think, like, I would say go to the special collections. I mean, like do your search first. Whether it's LexisNexis or newspapers.com. There's nothing like going to the library and uncovering a clip on a microfiche. There's something about that process that's magical to me. But now because you have newspapers.com, they make it a lot easier. But I will say that not everything is digitized on newspapers.com. So sometimes, especially like the church newsletters or the hard to find things that I want for my books, they're not in newspapers.com. So you have to kind of dig deeper. And that means going into the special collections, the microfiche section at your library.
I'll tell you, Atchison has a portion of their library that's genealogy for the town of Atchison. And
that's awesome.
It is an amazing section. There's also, when you're at the Chamber of Commerce, it's the depot there. There's a museum there that's right next door that has a lot of information. And hopefully the new guy that's running, or the new person, I don't know if it's a guy, the new person that's running the history museum there is much more open to answering questions as to where places were back in the day. Because they've changed the street names in Atchison. They used to be A, B, C, D streets, and now they're Atchison Street, Kansas Street, Division. Well, Division Street's always been there, but they've changed all the names of the streets. So, and make sure that when you're in Atchison, you at least go by the Amelia Earhart's grandparents' house. It's just about 3 blocks from there.
Speaking of Amelia Earhart, she's also connected to us, but not by blood. She's connected to the Putnams by marriage.
I have a secret. She wasn't born in Atchison.
Oh, really? Okay, that's
Even
good.
though Atchison says that, but again, this was one of the, researching stuff. I found her birth certificate. She was born in Wyandotte County, which is KCK, not Atchison. But there's no telling people they don't want to hear.
I find this out a lot. This happens a lot in Massachusetts and New England, that they want, certain cities want their claim to fame. So a good example is I wrote a book on Concord. There's always an ongoing battle where the first shots heard around the world during the American Revolution was shot. Was it in Concord or was it in Lexington? And it's funny, Concord says Concord, it was in Concord, and Lexington says it was in Lexington. So it's interesting who claims what, and usually they want it because they want that to be associated with their town.
Right. I mean, and they do have the Amelia Earhart Airport up there. And a friend of mine is, she is the tourism director at the Amelia Earhart Airport. And the thing is I did not find out about this Amelia Earhart thing until a month before we stopped doing tours up there. And no, I didn't read it online. So, but yeah, there's a long story that's related to it that I found out afterwards about a reporter that was run out of town for finding this information. So it's been hidden for a long time.
Yeah, and that's I mean, to me, that's fascinating. That they would go to that lengths to cover up a story, and you see that a lot. Actually, you see that like things that they don't want you to know that they've been covered up, and someone like myself or like you are going to keep digging and digging and digging until we find the truth. And and I'm glad that we have that, whatever that is, that gene or that drive to be able to uncover the truth.
So we've got just a few minutes left. I want you to be able to tell everybody, where can they find you and your books?
Sure. So my website, sambaltrusis.com, it's BALTRUSIS.com, has pretty much everything that I do, whether it's events. I do have several events coming up throughout the country, including the Vulture City Paracon coming up, and I have the Sleepy Hollow Paracon in Tarrytown, New York, as well as my Paracon, the Mass Paracon, and then also I'm actually heading out when I head to the Sally House. I'm going to do the McIntyre Villas, and that's coming up.
You will like that very much. We used to do the trolley tour as well, and we just investigated there back in May, and that was actually one of the backdrops for a film that we did with Joe Citrone and Richard Grund, The Deep Darkness. And I keep teasing, it hasn't seen the light of day, but I introduced them to the previous owners of the McIntyre Villa.
And I can't wait to go there, and I can't wait to go to the Sally House. I really haven't investigated that area, so I'm looking forward to doing more expanding beyond New England. I think that's been my goal this year, and we see that even in my schedule next year. I'm going to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee next year for a Paracon, and I'm doing West Virginia at a Paracon at a hotel. So expect more traveling for me and more haunted locations and more fun.
Well, where is the one in Pigeon Forge? Is that with Nick White?
So the one at Pigeon Forge is the East Tennessee Paracon, and it hasn't really been announced yet. So when it's announced, it'll be on my website, sambaltrusis.com.
Yeah, we go down to Pigeon Forge a lot. We like our spirits, but they're mostly the kind that. So make sure you go down to Gatlinburg and check out the moonshine distilleries. They're a lot of fun, and it's interesting to walk around down there. It's beautiful during the spring and the fall.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to. I grew up in Pensacola, so I would actually visit Tennessee a lot, especially if there was a hurricane coming into Pensacola. Like, we would always drive up to Tennessee. So I have my childhood in Tennessee experiences from hurricanes.
Well, it sounds to me like Katie Stafford and his team is going to be at the Tennessee Paracon.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah,
So,
I literally just signed up for it. I can't wait. I'm so, like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I can't wait to go to it, and I also can't wait to really explore Pigeon Forge, because I actually I've never been there, and I've heard great things about it.
Go off the main road, because
Okay.
the main road it's like Vegas. I mean, it's 4 lanes of traffic. Well, 3 lanes of traffic on each side, and it's horrible. And as far as that goes, and there's a pancake place on every corner. So pancakes are big down there, and let's see, Quaker steak is good. That's one of the few places we've actually eaten in Pigeon Forge. We usually stay in Gatlinburg, but my family lives in Bristol, so we go out that way every once in a while. And Brandon says he can show you around down there. He's part of Katie Stafford's team.
Awesome. I can't wait to go. And speaking, I talked a lot about Richard Estep, but he's going to be down there as well. So I'm assuming, I know it's not in the same area, but I would also love to go more west to visit the Bell Witch Caves. Like, that's something I've always wanted to do.
Yep, we were supposed to go to the Bell Witch Cave, and I broke my foot, and the doctor says you can't go walking around in caves right now. You get hurt. And I was like, okay. Wow. So we haven't been to Adams, Tennessee. The traffic out going towards Nashville sucks, but
oh, is it okay? Yeah, I don't know it that well.
Well, for me, it would be coming from Illinois,
yeah,
Kentucky, going through there to get there, so it's not a big deal. But I met my husband not too far from Memphis, so we used to live in Arkansas, so it wasn't that far, but 4 hours maybe. So, but let's see. Oh, and he says, Brandon says his wife is a descendant of the Bell Witch of the Bell family.
Ooh, see, I want to write a book about that someday, like that, because it's one of those cases that I've heard about, but I've been drawn to it, but I don't know why I've been so drawn to that case.
The question is how much of it is factual and how much of it is fantastical?
Well, I think that's very much like Salem. I think a lot there's some truth, and then there's a lot of not truth, and you gotta. The fun is really kind of untangling all the myths and misconceptions, and that's kind of what I love to do. I love to untangle the mess.
That's what I like. So, everybody, I want you to go check out sambaltrusis.com, get all the information about him. Join us here next Monday for my guest. Let's see if I can remember who it is. I sent everybody notes saying, hey, this is who my guest is, and here I can't even remember who it is. So Monday the 10th. Oh, I don't know. It's going to be somebody great.
Somebody amazing.
It is. It's going to be amazing, because I know I had a whole bunch of guests all lined up. Catch me tomorrow night on Paranormal Nation Radio, Not So Normal, with Carl and Ron. And we're going to have our guest on there, Tim Miley. He's going to be talking about autographs for pets, and all the things that he does with going to Paracons and raising money for animal shelters. So check that out tomorrow night at 5 p.m. Central. And join us back here next Monday for another great guest. And thank you, Sam, for coming on. I really appreciate your time, and safe travels. And let me know when you're in the Kansas City area. If I have a chance, maybe we can hop up there. We live 90 minutes away. So
well, I'm going to be in Kansas City in November, so maybe we can meet up then.
There's some good places up there to eat that you'll enjoy. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great night, and come back next Monday. Good night.
Good night.